It's a little after 5:30. I'll call this meeting to order. And everyone could please rise if you're able and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I have a few opening comments about structure for tonight, setting expectations. So tonight we have a joint workshop between members of the EDA and our City Council. This is a workshop format. City Council has been asked to join the EDA meeting due to the nature of the items on the agenda. But just to be clear, this is a workshop format. It's an opportunity to get presented information, to ask questions. But no decisions will be made tonight. No official action will be taken, nor is it expected. This is truly a working session and an opportunity for everyone to hear some important information for the first time. So with that said, we have a couple of agenda items, and I believe Patrick will start us off. Patrick or Dan will start us off
with the number 3.
Perfect. Item number 3, the Urban Land Institute Advisory Services Program.
Mayor, members of the council, and members of the EDA, this is more along the lines of a mark your calendars item. On Monday, March 18th at 6:30, which is when there's a regularly scheduled council workshop, the Urban Land Institute will be coming out to Forest Lake for a Navigating Your Competitive Future workshop. At this point, the attendees that we'd like to have would be the City Council, members of the EDA, and members of the Planning Commission attend this workshop. What the Navigating Your Competitive Future workshop is, it's a 2-hour workshop where the Urban Land Institute comes in and provides feedback on the city's current position in the market from a development perspective. They'll focus on what we're doing well and the areas that we can improve on. The structure to the workshop is it's broken down into 4 parts. The first part is they'll kind of provide a summary of the national and state trends that are affecting cities. They also will present a review of community data that's specific to Forest Lake, highlighting some areas of change within that data set. There's also a panel discussion that'll take place. The members of the panel are typically a city planner, a real estate developer, and somebody involved in public finance. We'll basically have some questions that they'll answer for us, and then that'll kind of move right into section number 4, which is a question and answer session where attendees can ask questions of the panel. Typically, what I was told is that sections 3 and 4 tend to kind of blend together. As the panel discussion goes on, they may trigger some questions from the audience or from the attendees at the meeting, and they tend to blend those two together. So the Q&A session, there is an opportunity for anybody to ask questions of the panel. Other communities who have gone through this workshop all have commented on how valuable it was as they've kind of developed their future plans, their economic development plans. It does a good job of providing areas on where the cities can improve on to make themselves more competitive in the marketplace. Again, this is a reminder that the meeting will be held on March 18th at 6:30. As the date gets closer on, we'll send out more information, more reminder information to the boards and commissions that will be invited to that. It's also members of the public can attend as well, but just wanted to kind of get that on your radar screen that the Urban Land Institute will be coming out to perform that service for us.
Thank you. Any questions for Dan? Dan, just a quick point of clarification for myself. How long of a session is that expected to be?
It's a 2-hour session, so what they ballpark for, and they tend to keep them on a pretty close that 2-hour schedule for those workshops.
Thank you. Anything else? All right, moving on. We have the whole property discussion on our agenda. My suggested format is that we invite the whole property project to come up and present and allow for a presentation, and then allow for EDA members to ask any questions, council to ask any questions. We'll go from there. If you are here and interested in providing public comment, I will cut off discussion no matter where we are at about 6:35, so we have at least 15 minutes of opportunity for public comment. So we'll just keep that in mind as we go through the discussion here. But I think that public comment period is something I would like to allow for tonight. So we also have a council meeting at 7, so there's some time management tonight. So with that, I invite the whole project team to come to the podium. Welcome.
Thank you, Mayor. My name is Gary Houle. I'm one of the owners of E.J. Houle Company in Forest Lake. And just very briefly, I'd like to let you know the reasons for our decision to sell. Obviously, we've been looking for a buyer for quite a while. We've had numerous buyers approach us. Most of those buyers were looking at some type of a housing. When David Ratchie approached us with his concept, it was very exciting for us because we saw that as an opportunity to leave to exit the business and still leave the city with something that we've, and that's really important to us. David has a great vision for the city and a vision that would incorporate some real potential for growth with the hotel convention center, drawing people not just to downtown but to the entire area. So David didn't have much convincing to do. His project spoke for itself, and I hope it speaks to you as well. It is an opportunity, I believe, for the city to see some real growth in not just downtown, but for the entire area. And with that, I'd leave it to David.
Thank you. Good evening. Thank you, Your Honor, and board members and council members that are here. My name is David Ratchie. I work with Gatehouse Capital. We are a Dallas-based development firm. It's been around for about 20 years. In those 20 years, we've developed over $1 billion worth of hospitality properties. All of them are hospitality. That's what we specialize in. We don't really do anything other than maybe mixed use, where some of ours would have residences with them. It was started by Marty Collins, and we had the distinction of being the very first developers of the W Hotels, which for Starwood became their absolute best brand, which is now part of Marriott since the acquisition. Just a couple of samples. We did the W in Hollywood with residences. We did the W in Dallas with residences, and we did the W San Diego and the W Silicon Valley. We have 3 platforms. That is part of our lifestyle platform in which we develop. We also have a medical platform where we work with hotels and medical universities and medical centers, where we actually build a hotel with them, either integrated in with their hotel or very, very close, but always in association with them. That's an absolutely new and very exciting project for us. We just opened the Home 2 Suites in downtown Dallas with Baylor University. We'll be doing a couple more with them, and we have a couple other announcements that I'm not allowed to talk about yet, but I'm very excited about. And then the third platform, which is our public-private partnership, which is typically shortened to 3P, and that's what we're here tonight. We're talking about something that is a public-private partnership, something that we do with cities. And I have to, and just to give you a couple of those kind of hotel convention centers, much like this that we recently opened, the Marriott in Odessa, Texas, the Fairfield in Decatur, and the Courtyard in Midlothian, Texas. And I guess I want to start, first of all, by thanking the Houle family, because I think they've done the community a great service over the last over 100 years. I have to be honest with you, I'm only up here tonight because of the Houle family. This is really unusual for us, because Gatehouse usually doesn't go to a city and say, you should do this. When I started about 3 years ago at Gatehouse, when they got me to come over, it was because our public-private platform was really starting to take off. And we get cities calling us all the time, and they needed another person to work up in the northern part of the country to be able to field and work with these new clients. And at the time, 3 years ago, I mentioned Forest Lake. I think these are great projects. I would love to see one in my hometown. At the time, they said, well, we don't do that. We don't usually go and propose, but if you want to do that's fine. But we hired you because we're behind on cities coming to us. And at the time, I talked to the mayor, had some conversations. There was some property that the McGowans own with my family, 97 and 61 by the old Township Hall, that I thought would be great. It was pretty clear at the time the mayor wasn't interested in it, and I got really busy. And when the representatives for the Hools came to me and said, are you interested in doing one of your hotels in Forest Lake? I said, well, I've already gone down that road. Unless they come to me, I don't think it's going to work. And then they told me it was a Hools property. And I thought, this is a huge opportunity for Forest Lake. And I gave the worst pitch I ever gave. This is true. Because I told the Hools, I don't care whether you want to go with me or not. I'm here because if I can do something for the city that's accretive to what we're doing, help revitalize downtown, drive economic development, which I know these projects do, I'm happy to go into it and try to do it. So that's why we're here, and I do want to thank them. They have been, believe me, they could have sold it by now. So since this is an unusual approach for us, I think I just kind of want to, I'm sure everybody in the Economic Development Agency already knows what a 3P is. There's people in the audience, so I guess just kind of explain it. You know, the public-private partnerships are always with a private developer as well as a city. And, you know, the basic process for doing these things, they're there to help finance a public-private partnership or a project. And they can be various things. We only do hotel convention centers with cities. So that's what we're talking about here. And it would be something we do in conjunction and in partnership with the city. And, you know, we always approach this that the city is our client. We'll do what we need to do to make you happy as long as we can also participate in a successful way. But we always see the city as driving the bus. So I think the other question is, why do cities do it? I get that question a lot. Why do cities want to go into these? Well, one, it's to do a project that couldn't be done otherwise. These hotel convention centers, and I don't want to say none, but I can't think of a single example nationally where a hotel convention center has been put in that hasn't been some kind of public-private partnership. That's what drives these, because cities can benefit in ways that the private sector can't. And that's primarily one of the things that we do when we have our process. We will do an econometric study where we'll go get a third party to go do a study to say, with this project, you know, this is how much that you will see in economic development over the next 10 years. And we do these with a lot of cities. I've never seen one come in at less than $5 for every dollar that they put in initially, and it usually goes up to 10. So it's a really big return on terms of that partnership for the city. So what's really unique about Gatehouse and why I joined them, and I started a startup 8 years ago. It was hard to leave there and hire a CEO and say, here's my baby, but it was a real big opportunity. And one of the reasons they do it is there's not a lot of companies that do this in the first place. There's almost none that do it for smaller cities. So one of the things when you're talking about a smaller city, these guys, I guarantee, are all overworked, right? No one's nodding, but I'm sure that they are. And they don't, have the opportunity to say, here, I'm going to dedicate a person for 2 years to work on a project. So they really put together at Gatehouse, and why I joined them was a turnkey process. And it's very unique to what we do. And there's 4 steps to it. The first part is the pre-development side of it, and that's the initial engagement. And that is, it's not where and it's called it's called pre-development because we're putting together a plan. And I'll get into what we think this might be able to be, but it's really just a starting point, because it's not where we cloister ourselves with a whole bunch of consultants and come back to you and say, here you go. We actually, now this is where I live, usually I say, I'm in the community a lot. Well, I'm in this community a lot, but we do go out and we talk to citizens. We have open houses. What you see tonight and what we'll talk about is really just a starting point to start that conversation with the community and understand what they want to do. Obviously, we work with the council and the EDA. Probably the most important person in these processes is your city administrator, and work out how do we do this, what's the best financial structure to go forward with this that works for both the city and Gatehouse. After we put that together, we'll put together a report. We come and present that, and at that point, the council can say either, yeah, we're interested in moving forward with this program, or no, that's not going to work for us, and then we're just done with the engagement. Again, the city's always in the driver's seat with these projects. If the city decides to go forward, by the way, the pre-development process takes about 3 to 4 months. And then we move it into pre-construction if we move ahead in the partnership, which is another 4 to 6 months. And at that point, we have to flush out, you see pretty pictures around. Oh, Dan, how do I get that up? You'll see pretty pictures up here in a second. Dan, is there something I need to do?
Nope, they're
Okay.
Just take 1 second.
No problem. They look great, and a lot of people think that you're done with planning when that happens. I assure you, we're not. There's a lot that goes in after that. The biggest part is we have to do at least a good amount of the construction drawings so we can get a fixed bid. So one of the things that we always do is we do a bond to completion. So once we start the process, when you're working with the city, there's never more money. That's it. You know, you set it, that's the budget, you can't go over it. So we always do a bond to completion. We have to do quite a bit of the construction drawings at that point. And then we'll get that fixed bid, and then we'll tighten all that up, finalize things on the financing structure with our side of the financing, and then move forward with the next phase, which is the actual construction. And it is what you think it is. You're building a building, and that takes usually 16 to 18 months. And then after that, the fourth phase, which is operations. And what's really different about our approach with the public-private partnership, unlike our other two platforms and what most developers do, they try to get in here, stabilize a hotel, and then sell it. We look at these as very long-term holds. We actually look at them at 20-year projects. So that is our goal with these projects, is to stay in it. So I think after all that said, I apologize for all that, but I want to set it up. So we're here to talk about the Hoole Feed Mill project. And again, I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for that site. I think it's a huge opportunity, whether it's my hometown or not. But I have fond memories of, you've fed many of my furry creatures over the years going in there. So I think it's a huge opportunity to really kind of rebuild downtown, get a lot of people walking on the streets. And again, this is a starting point, but the idea, as these go back and forth, is a 100 to 150 room hotel attached to a convention center. And a convention center that would hold a really decent amount of people. One of the things that we have in Forest Lake is if you want to have a larger wedding, you have to leave Forest Lake. If you want really any function over 300, you got to get out of Forest Lake. The other part is if you're looking for hotel services, something that's really highly touched, highly catered party or wedding or event, it's hard to get that with a large group in Forest Lake. Not that you can't do it, and everybody does a great job here. It's just this is part of the market that just isn't done. I think also the other part of it is Forest Lake is underserved in terms of hotel rooms. I can name market after market after market. Typically, you would get over 500 keys or 500 rooms in a community that's on a major freeway that has this many people living in it. And we have less than 100. The good news is, my concerns before is we didn't have enough rooms to do a project like this. The casino putting in the hotel, a good hotel, a nice hotel, very nice hotel actually from what I understand, and 116 keys, that actually helps this project because it gives meeting planners or people who want to do bigger conventions or bigger meetings, another hotel, because we're going to have 100 to 150 keys. If 600 people are coming to a wedding, there's going to be a lot of rooms that are rented in other parts in Forest Lake. And you don't want to have them go all the way to Lina Lakes. And that's what they would have had to do before if it can't be handled here. So it's, I know you guys are going to have a lot of questions because every time I talk to a city administrator or a mayor, I get all the same questions, and they're great questions, which is, how much does it cost? What do we have to do? And that's really what we go through with the pre-development. Before we start this, we really don't know what it's going to be. We have to go in and we have to do a feasibility study where we'll go in, work with, one of the gold standards in the industry that can tell you what kind of pro forma you're going to get out of the hotel, what types of business you can bring in, what kind of conventions, what kind of weddings, those type of aspects of it. At the same time, we'll do an econometric study so the city will understand, based on what that partnership is required by the city, what kind of return that they can expect over the next 10 years from that partnership. But as we go through that process and we listen to the public, we look at the results from the tests studies, as we work with your city administrator, that's where we'll start forming answers to a lot of the questions you're going to ask me tonight. And I'm just going to wait for it, and I want to, please grant me some patience tonight, because a lot of it will be, that's something that we need to answer in the pre-development process. With that being said, I think that you're looking at something that you definitely want to have a rooftop bar and restaurant, something that people can go up. And, I know it's really cold today, but it will be warm, it will be sunny. It will be why most of us live in the Forest Lake area, because we like the recreation that we get, even in the winter, the ice fishing as well. But being up in the rooftop deck in the summer, eating a nice meal or having a drink is something we see. And actually, as I think I can direct which one this goes to. Here's what you see from First Lake, and this is just a concept. Well, I guess I can't.
Hit escape.
What?
Hit escape and it should let you.
Okay, so this is from First Lake, looking, obviously, the Lakeside Park. And I'm going to let it keep going back and forth. But you see the large overhang deck. That's where the outdoor bar and restaurant would be. So a lot of seating that you can have out there. And then the convention center would be in the back. And as part of the pre-development, we'll decide, how big that can be. I can tell you it can be bigger now that the racetrack is putting in the hotel rooms. I will also tell you that I think that Vinales will do fantastic with this project, because we're going to have a lot of people. If you're going to a wedding on a weekend and you're not actually part of the wedding party, you have a lot of downtime. So this is the opportunity for people to go out, walk the street, be engaged in our downtown, and they're down there. So I guess I would open up to questions at this point. Again, this is a starting point of a conversation and a process. And like I said, it's a little bit unusual for us, because usually the city will come to us and say, this is what we'd like to do. So I await your questions. I would love to hear some.
That'll open it up. Questions, members of the EDA. Start with you, and then we'll hand it off to any questions that council members Bystrom or Munson may have.
I think I'd like to ask, what kind of product are you guys leaning towards? Was it a Hyatt or a Marriott?
Yeah, so with these smaller markets, a full-service hotel is really not going to be, I mean, we'll find out. If it is, love to do a full service. But this is probably going to be a Marriott product, but it'll be probably a Courtyard.
Yeah.
Love to see a Courtyard. If it is a Hyatt, it'd be more of the Hyatt Place product. We tend to, so the big three in conventions, you want Marriott, number one. They're the monster. That's what everybody wants. They're great. Meeting planners love them. Wedding planners love them. That's who you go to. Business people love it because they like to get their points and then stay somewhere warm in the summer. So we go first to Marriott, so a Courtyard, talk to them. Again, when the numbers come in, we'll know who we need to go to. But then it's Hilton, and then it's Hyatt. And then, by the way, there's one new product on that really has come on strong, which is Cambria.
Yeah.
It used to be called Cambria Suites, but they've rebranded that to a lifestyle brand that works really well with convention centers.
David, so you and I, we've spoken in the past, you've been back, presented to us a few things. Can you talk about the study, though, that the kind of first engagement the city or first expense maybe the city will incur on doing a project like this?
Again, the first step is the pre-development. That's where the studies happen. And the very first study we'd do in Forest Lake, not always, but here we would, is to do that feasibility study to make sure that a hotel would work. If we get that back and it says, this isn't going to work, we'll stop the process at that, and we wouldn't go any further. And that typically those projects or those studies cost anywhere from $20,000 to $25,000.
And that would be fully on the city.
It would be, yeah. Not necessarily. To start so there's a refundable deposit to start the pre-development process. It's fully refundable. If we go ahead with the project, city would get that money back. So in that case, if we went forward, that wouldn't cost the city. It would cost, the project would absorb that.
So if it doesn't go forward, then the city pays for that study?
Yeah,
correct?
and that would be the total cost at
Okay.
that point.
Who owns that study after?
You guys own the study.
Now, is
Although I would say at that point, it's probably not a study you want to show anybody. It would probably say that you can't do a hotel in Forest Lake.
And
Now,
who-
is this something we could use Washington County grant money for? Not on a feasibility, but
Mayor Breen, if I may.
Yes, please.
Members of the EDA, members of the council. The policy of the CDA's pre-development finance fund is not to fund projects that have that have a developer identified. It's to fund those projects that are a little bit harder to get started. So we would not be able to fund this pre-development effort.
Well, because this is just an introduction to an idea, I know there's a whole lot that has to be kind of worked out over time, like there's many variables as to how the partnership really does take hold and what the contributions are by the partnership. The things that capture me about this idea is that we have probably the most significant piece of property downtown, in a broader area than that actually. And we have a family, a storied family with a storied history in Forest Lake, that's looking beyond just putting some sort of function there, because I think housing is probably the obvious one, that depends on the rest of downtown to support it. They're willing to talk about something that will catalyze downtown, that's got a dimension that goes far beyond just putting a function on a site. It's the kind of function that really does do for downtown what we've talked forever about doing. We just have to get to the point where we have proven that it does work. So I find it a really exciting proposition. We have a developer that specializes in this particular arena, in this particular scale of city. And they bring a certain expertise forward that suggests that they certainly wouldn't be here talking unless they didn't believe to some degree this has a lot of merit. So I look at this as something that I've been happy to see on the horizon for a while. I'm glad it's finally before us, because in many ways it gives us a chance to talk about a city really investing in its future. And I think this is a significant moment to talk about an anchor to an area. And I believe in anchors to areas catalyzing the balance of the area. That could really do wonders for downtown. And I hope that we come to the point where we are moving forward through staff, through workshops, and talking about how this specific arrangement can be made, and going at least as far as to find out whether it's a valid idea in the marketplace. That's my goal with the whole thing, is to see it justified in the marketplace, and I think we can get there as a team effort.
Madam Mayor?
Other questions? Yes, please.
I just wanted to get a little bit more in depth in this public-private partnership and exactly what that means. Where's the taxpayer getting involved?
Well, it's different
Beyond the study.
Yeah, well, it's different in every project, and I'm sure that your city administrator has gone through and seen the agreements we've had with other cities. I mean, that they're always open. And it's different with every single city, because every single city has different circumstances. They like things differently. Minnesota, actually, for hotels is harder than other states. Primarily, there's a lot of things that are different about how development happens here opposed to Wisconsin or Texas, where there's a lot more of the funds from counties and states to fund that pre-development part of it. And once you get through the pre-development, then it's all laid out. All the questions you have will be answered in that. And that's also true with the community. And at that point, I should mention, we don't just bring it to the city council. After we've done that, we will go out to the community if the council wants us to have those listings, just go out and have a lot of questions and answers. I've done a lot of those over the years, and actually I enjoy it because I think what I've always seen is people get excited. They see the pretty pictures, that's great, but when they understand the impact that it will have on a community, this really will drive employers to come here. This will drive people to come in and spend money in Forest Lake that never would any other way. And what's dynamic about a convention center is on the weekends you have social events, you have weddings, you have different functions that fraternal groups do, and then during the week you have business people come in. You have the business conferences. So and I'll apologize. I always get Worthington and another city. I think it's Worthington has about a conference center that seats 500 people. And they wish they built it bigger. They didn't think they would have the business they have. Every single weekend, it is rented out, the full ballroom, and then they have 2 to 3 business conferences every single week. That's in a small town on the freeway in 90 in southwest Minnesota, and there's not much around it. And so those are the type of things you can drive with these kind of projects. And, and I'm not dishing any city in Minnesota, but Forest Lake by far is the place that I would want to go to a conference in the summertime especially. And I think it's a special place, and I think that we can really present that to businesses and people who want to do weddings to come here and do it here.
Do you have a guesstimate of how many jobs might be created?
That would actually be in the econometric study. I will tell you that I just went through this on a contract. We're usually required in other states to guarantee how many full-time jobs. So as we go through this process, we'll identify those. But I will tell you the number one driving force in new jobs is the hospitality industry. It's very labor intensive. You can't really do it with automation. So this is something that would drive a lot of full-time permanent jobs on both the convention side and the hotel side. But obviously the temporary for construction and that aspect as well.
Thank you.
Other questions? Councilmember Bystrom?
Can you talk in a little more detail about that pre-development phase, the kind of the scope of the data collection, and give us some additional detail on that? What exactly do you want to come out of that with?
So very specifically, it is that we'll do that feasibility study. We'll do an econometric study. And so when I say that, Gatehouse will work with a third party. So it's not us telling you, hey, this is feasible. It is HVS or CBRE or one of the other gold standards in our industry. The other reason we like using them is they have more data than anybody. They've done these for years and years and years, so they not only have the data that's current, meaning there's a lot of reports on an industry. Our industry really shares a lot of information, more than I'm always surprised at how much we share with each other, but we have something called a STAR report where everybody reports how many rooms they sold, on what night, for how much, and that'll be more difficult here. And there's usually also, you get a lot of information from tax, occupancy tax receipts, which will be more difficult here. What HVS will do, actually I'll probably use them for this because they'll go to a market that they have good stats for those that looks like Forest Lake. So then they'll be able to come in and say, for this project with these types of flags that we talked about, the brand of hotel, the size convention center, we have data on 27 that were in the last 2 or 3 years that were built and are up and going. So they'll be able to go and say, hey, this was done here, this is what you should be able to expect. So it's a very detailed report. It will take you an hour or two to read just that report. We'll do the econometric study, which will go through and say, for this type of project in your area, it'll create this many construction jobs, this many permanent jobs, this many part-time jobs, and go through and also tell you this is kind of so. And I think we gave you a sample one from one of our other clients. Did we do that at a? Well, that was a very long ago meeting. Maybe not 2 mayors ago, but a mayor ago. And we can supply you with one of those. And actually, we can supply you with. We'll black out a client. We'll actually give you a sample of the full report. So we can give you a detail. We can give it to you and say, here, this is what you'll get at the end. It's a very large report. But then, so the econometrics will also say. It won't tell you because they don't know how much money you're going to be putting in, but it'll say this is, you're going to get $50 million in the next 10 years of economic impact if you do this project directly because of this project. Then we'll work with architects. We'll work with DLR, which is who did these renderings, we'll do a site plan. And we'll kind of go through a lot of different ways. That's where listening to the community and what they like to see gets involved. And then we'll go through the initial kind of planning of what that would look like. So you'll see actually the ground floor, what the ballroom size is, each floor of the hotel room. So you'll get a sense. You'll also get a mix of hotel rooms. So it'll be X amount of king suites, X amount of queens. So we'll go through all of that as part of this process. And then we'll get a sense from that. We'll be able to do an initial budget of how much the project will cost. And that's where we can start working with your city administrator to put together what the financing package would look like.
And to clarify, that pre-development study, $20,000 to $25,000, and you said about 4 to 6 months in duration. Is that?
Oh, not for that study. I can tell you, we don't generally break them out. We'll get the engagement with the deposit. We'll do that first. If that comes back no, we'll refund the remainder of the deposit. But we can talk. Listen, this is my hometown, and if I can't do, I'll have to go and fight and figure out what we can do, and that's some of the things that Mark's been leaning on me about is what we can do to kind of break this apart, and we'll try. We'll do our best. But just to answer your question, probably 4 weeks for that part of it.
When you're doing your study, do you work with the local Chamber of Commerce to
love to do
utilize
that.
their resources and the businesses to drum
Yeah,
up
so-
the enthusiasm? And
Yeah, so when HVS does a study, they'll come into the community and they'll want to talk to the chamber, they'll want to talk to the school district, they'll talk to the hospitals, they'll talk to the large employers. They'll go and really canvass the entire community to try to figure out what kind of induced demand, can be created while we're here. So absolutely love it. In fact, most communities, the Chamber of Commerce is who brings us in. They walk us in the door.
Do we know what the current occupancy rate of our current hotels in Forest Lake is?
No, it would be good if you had an occupancy tax because those are ways that you can learn that information.
Is the occupancy tax something we should introduce?
Oh, let me do an addendum. I don't know if a STAR report, it's an industry report that you can buy. I don't know if the two hotels here report.
Right.
I doubt they would report because all they would be doing is looking at each other's stuff.
Right.
Usually you need a group of hotels to pool. So when you look at the report, you don't know who's what. I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
Oh, no, you didn't.
You're used to that, so.
Yeah. The occupancy tax is something that should be talked about early on in this proposition as to whether that's going to be a component of the discussion or not.
Yeah, well, listen, when I talk about it's difficult to develop in Minnesota, it's crazy how Minnesota limits cities on what they can do. And it's frustrating for me because it's generally a tax that's not paid by the citizens in that community. And it's generally, in almost all states, it's required to go to something like a convention center. It's the people coming out from outside the community, they're using the convention center. It's a way for them to pay for what they're using. So in Minnesota, it's limited to 3%. I think, is that true? I think
true,
it is.
yes.
Yeah, to the best of my knowledge, it's true. It can be used, by the way, for studies like this, in my understanding. If I'm wrong, I'm not an attorney. I'll give you an example. In Wisconsin, it's about 8.5% that I think the local occupancy tax the city gets to levy. Up to that. In Iowa, it's 7%. 7% generates a lot of money. You're talking about room revenues in a project like this, anywhere from $3.5 to $6.5 million a year. 10% of that it pays for a lot. And I think that the process in Minnesota, as I understand it, and I'm familiar with it because I worked with the city of Marshall, Minnesota, which was one of the cities. If you know it, if you're a hockey family at all, you know Marshall, Minnesota, because they have one of the best arenas in the world. Have you been there?
I have.
Yeah, it's a Red Baron Arena. It was $12 million. I mean, it's a palace. And that was, what they did is they went to the city and said, or went to the state, you have to go to the legislature and say, we would like to have an occupancy tax of 8 or 9 to pay for this project. How hard or not that is to get, I'll tell you, Marshall found it to be, they were excited, the state was excited, the governor was excited about the project. And then what you're required to do then, even if they approve it, you have to go to the citizens of your city and have them approve it. My understanding, though, is that when that happens, every time that has been on a ballot in Minnesota, it's passed, because people understand they're not paying the tax. People coming from outside the community are paying tax. If we can get that done, I think that's probably the way that you can pay for the convention side. So in that sense, the taxpayers wouldn't be paying for that. There would be people coming and utilizing those services would pay for that portion of it. I hope that answered the question.
Dave, quick question. So, in essence, in most of these situations, I know there's an operating entity, but is the city getting into the event and convention business?
Yeah. No, and I want it, when we say that we're in it for 20 years, we'll own the asset for 20 years, and we'll do what we call asset management. That doesn't mean on day-to-day we have anybody there. It means that we manage the manager. And we would most likely, and I've already talked to them, use Aimbridge. Aimbridge is by far the largest management companies for hotel conventions in the country, centers. So they would manage both of those. I can't imagine anybody better. I mean, they're really good. So the city really, because cities don't manage those kind of projects. By the way, you did a great job plowing the streets today. I'm very impressed. So
Yeah, I'm aware of that, but so the profit and loss, taking loss on that space, or that, is that typically the city would be taking that on?
it depends. I can tell you that in Mason City, where we're likely to sign a development services agreement in the next 45 days, I don't want to jinx myself, we were originally not going to own the convention center. We're taking that on as part of the project because it wasn't going to be able to be done any other way. So we actually own the convention center there, and we own the profit and loss on that. And we pay the taxes on that, too. So there's a lot of different ways that you can do it.
The timeline for that particular project, how long has that project been in play? Like from this conversation with EDA council to where you are?
With Gatehouse? Or just overall in the project?
That
was 5 years. So 5 years ago, they started it. It's called the River City Renaissance Project. They have a great program in Iowa where they have a state occupancy tax. And the state occupancy tax is pooled by the state and given out as grants to outstate cities to do projects like this. So they're getting a $10 million grant.
But that's been a 5-year development effort
Yeah,
to
but
pull
that's,
that package
I would say that's way too long. I would expect this, what would slow down this project would be that we have to go to the state and say, because I'll say it bluntly, I don't think the city should do this if we can't get the higher occupancy tax. I personally would be for it, not just as Gatehouse, but as a member of the community. But I know this community well. I don't think they would be up for it. So if we can't get that occupancy tax in, so whatever that takes, I don't think we're going to get in this cycle. I think we'd probably get in the next cycle, and I don't know how long it is when you can have that election. I think that's what would slow this process down. But other than that, it would be 2 years. It's kind of start to finish.
Other questions?
Well, we certainly have to learn the dollars and cents involved. There's no question about it, because we have to answer to the taxpayers of how this is going to work on our end. And I got to tell you guys, I was a little disappointed in the way this was approached. Before this conversation came to us, it's in the paper that it's all up to us to make the decision. And that's a big turnoff for me, I'll tell you, because if that's the way we're going to do business, that's not the way to do things. This conversation should have taken place first.
I absolutely agree with you. This is an unusual situation. This is not how we usually go in. Usually, again, the city comes to us. We didn't put it in the paper at all. I promise you we had nothing. I am dumbfounded at the amount of attention that this has hit. And I kept telling, we're not even close to having much of a conversation yet. I don't know why these articles are hitting.
Because it was even, it put Patrick and everybody else in a kind of a quandary too, because of the fact that all of a sudden, they're trying to answer to people, well, what's going on? We didn't know what was going on.
Well, I will tell you, I agree with you. It would have been better if it didn't happen that way. It was not on the efforts of Gatehouse, I assure you.
Yeah, the only comment I want to make, I mean, there's going to be lots more questions.
No.
Certainly, because looks like it's going to be kind of a difficult time or difficult situation to pin down the dollars and cents and exactly what the city's commitment is on this thing, you know.
No, it's pretty straightforward. So there's a refundable deposit of $150,000. Again, if the study came back and said we can't do it, it's all but $25,000 for that is returned. If the city goes forward with the project, that's a refundable deposit, and the city would get that back. After the pre-development, you would have every single number and every answer that you need to make a decision from the council standpoint. So again, we're very unique. We have that 4-step process, and it works really well. These are hard projects to do. They're hard to get across the finish line. And one of the process, in terms of this process, it's why I joined Gatehouse. They do a phenomenal job. Their success rate in helping cities get these things done is really pretty phenomenal.
You know, just one more quick comment, if you don't mind, Mr. Madam Mayor. I've known the whole family for decades. His grandpa was delivering feed to my grandpa on a farm. That's how long it's been. And I would love to see the Hools be able to develop their property. I just want to see it done properly, and I want to make sure that the taxpayers are protected in any kind of deal that we make here. And this project, I have nothing against the project as it's, as is. I think the other consideration, we're a long ways from getting into that part of it, but parking is your biggest consideration there. But as far as having a project there, I think it's a great, and I hope the Hools do very well on it. But
they'll do well regardless whether this project goes forward or not. And he knows that I wish him the best on it. As to the parking, I think we have an overall bigger parking problem than.
No question
right.
about it.
And I think there's an opportunity here, and I addressed it a little bit in the package that you received ahead of time. I think there's an opportunity. I was just thinking about it today, and I was thinking about 50th in France and Edina. And Edina decided they wanted to have a downtown, that they wanted it because there really wasn't one. And that's where they picked, and, they were struggling. And then they put in the municipal parking ramp. And that's, you can't say that that's not been a successful project for that city and a great place to go. But if it didn't have that, the city wasn't proactive, and that's what I fear, with Forest Lake, because it's not the greatest situation now, and we jam 600 people in every single weekend downtown, and the walking, and you have the local area of business as well. You're right, it can be a problem, but I think it's an opportunity. I really do.
At what point do you close the deal with Hools? Is it after the pre-development and the city approves the plan?
I think that's yet to be determined.
Well, my question, the reason I ask is, if you close the deal before the city determines what they're going to do, if they're going to go ahead, then you own the property and
Yeah,
who's got control over
yeah,
what goes there next?
Yeah, that wouldn't happen.
No, that's not
Okay.
Yeah, so, I think that, and I would, let's say you don't want to do this project, and I'm just discussing as a Forest Lake citizen, I would hope that the city would buy that property, even if you don't want to do this project, because it's so important to Forest Lake to get that right. And again, that's what drove me to work on this project. That, and, you were talking about your grandparents. My grandparents in the 1920s would go by the Hools grocery store to know which way to go around the lake to get to their cabin. So, a lot of fond memories. My brother worked for the Hools, and which I just found out when I was talking to him today. So there's a lot there, and they've been a great stalwart family in Forest Lake, and I would want us to honor that corner.
I guess maybe just a couple of comments first and then questions. I'll echo the comments Councilmember Husnick just made on the Hool family and your contributions to Forest Lake and just how important that is. This is your legacy. One thing that as I listen to this conversation, as I compare with other projects, is I think expectations of timeline is going to be critically important, and just confirmation on where we are in this process and expectations of the seller of when they would ultimately like to close. I think we just have to be as transparent as possible, because this can be a very long project. So I just want to be clear on that. If I were to, in my perfect world, the project that came before us wouldn't necessarily have the city of Forest Lake as the client. And I think that is a fact that we're all kind of wrestling with and just trying to understand, what does this mean and what are the costs? I'm also trying to reconcile what seems to be a very long potential period of study with also it can just be in 4 weeks, and want to, again, understand what we're getting when, so we can be transparent on timeline and when decisions can be made, so that the seller can make decisions as well. One of the things I would like to see is, you mentioned a couple of the example studies, and I would like to see staff take a look at some of those example studies, and then also bring forward, here's what else would need to be looked at. As I hear this project and as I think about what's going to happen, there's infrastructure that needs to be considered. There is, yes, the pro forma financial statements and the economic impact study and all of those things, but there's also things that the city needs to consider, especially if we're going to take a position of this prominence. And I'm not certain that study is going to cover all of those things. And so I think we need to have a full list of well-vetted, here's what we need to consider before we were to make a decision. It sounds easy to just say it's just $20,000 and let's just, let's spend that
I never
amount.
said it was easy. I really did.
But it's an attractive, dangle it out there, perhaps proposition, but I think that 20,000 actually becomes something that's a larger number and a longer timeline. And what I I just want to be transparent on what those costs are going to be, who's doing what, and what the timeline looks like, so that everybody who's making a decision on this project has the right information at the right time, and we're just being as transparent as possible, so.
Yeah, and the only thing I want to add is that staff recommendations to me are very, very important. You know, they have to be fully aware of what's going on, and they're our lifeblood as far as getting the right information, so they have to have the information to pass on to us, I think. They do it full-time, you know, so.
No, the most important person is their city administrator in these processes.
Yeah.
I suspect to get to this point, there's maybe been some back-of-the-envelope pro forma information that's been done. I would encourage that information, if possible, to be shared with staff, and then also to compare that with what else would we receive in the full study, reconciled to a list of our city engineers really good at coming up with, here's also the things that we need to consider. And all of those data points are going to be important, at least for me, and I think for everybody sitting up here on deciding what we do next.
I would echo that as well. I think full transparency from start to finish with this process. I mean, I heard 20 to 25,000, and then all of a sudden I heard 150,000, and I'm not really quite sure how that's all playing out.
Let me clarify that.
Okay.
It's a $150,000 refundable deposit. Mr. Finneman is the one who brought up the concept of doing the feasibility study. We would do the feasibility study first. If that came back and said, this isn't going to work in this community, we would stop there. And that's 25,000. That's generally what that project is. So at that point, that's what, you know, if you want, that's the ante for the city. That's kind of your downside at that point. If we go forward from that point, it's 150,000. The report is extensive. It really is. That's why it takes 4 months opposed to 4 weeks. 4 weeks is something the industry can put together. We never will give you numbers. They will come from a third party, because we don't want anybody to come back to us and say, but you said. And so at that point, that's why it takes another 2 to 3 months to get all the other things. But we will absolutely work with the city engineer as much, well, not as much as the city administrator. He's going to do the heavy lifting. And, you know, he's going to tell me what you guys need to know, and we'll make sure that we answer all those questions.
I do also want to say this is an exciting opportunity. 100 years ago, the markets decided that a feed mill was going to go at that location. It's fun to think about what could go there next, and so it's a great opportunity for the community. It's a great opportunity for the whole family. Any other questions? Yes.
I've got one question that's pretty important for me to understand. You said if we couldn't get the higher occupancy tax from the state approved, you wouldn't recommend going forward for Forest Lake.
No,
How much time do we need to get that done and through the legislature?
This is a great question. You have to go through the legislature. I don't know that we'll get through this session. And while I personally would still, as a citizen, support it, I know that it would be difficult. I think is a large population in Forest Lake that wouldn't want to spend the money on building a convention center. And I personally I tend to be a libertarian about those things. I like user fees. And, you know, people are going to benefit. I mean, we're going to all benefit from the economic development of it. But there's people directly using these facilities, and that's the easiest way to get that money.
So when we do get to the dollars and cents of it, are there going to be two columns? One if we do get the higher tax rate, one if we don't?
Yes. I mean, absolutely, that would be part of it.
So
Yeah,
at what point, if this doesn't get through the legislature, at what point do we bow out? Pre-construction?
No. Listen, I think that this is an introduction, right? This is to talk about it. I think if it's something that the city and the EDA is really going to consider, I think we need to go have a conversation with Senator Housley and Representative Dittmer and just get their ideas on what that timing is. And this might, you know, the timing might have passed. I would have hoped, but it was a different council and a different mayor. I would have liked to have started this long before this session of the state. But, you know, again, the city's always the client, and we didn't set the agenda, so.
And just to follow up on that question is, throughout a process like this, there will be mileposts that say go or not, no go. Whether it's the first part is the study, whether it's the finances don't work because of an occupancy tax, whether the infrastructure is too expensive, whether, whatever. You know, there's a whole bunch of moving parts in here, but there will be a number of places where we'll stop and say, okay, do we still go forward, or do we say we're done? So.
Is the local hospitality tax the 3 or thereabouts percent? It's a positive additive to this proposition, but it's not the statewide proposition. Does that temper your thinking a little bit about whether this went ahead or not?
I don't know exactly what that tax would be because it's not in place. And, you know, back of the envelope and that side, I can give you a guess of what's happening. I think it gets you 40, at best 50% the way there to pay for the convention center with no money out of pocket for the city or the taxpayers of the city. So it helps, and then that's something, you know, obviously that's something for the council to decide. You know, do we want to do it with the 3% tax that we can do?
Go ahead.
Patrick, where, the money to fund the study initially, where'd that come from?
Oh, well, economic development has I think it's $50,000 budget to spend on studies, or activities, I should say, not particularly studies, so it might come out of there.
Right, you talked about $150,000.
Well, I don't know exactly where, and what I eventually here will ask for is a list of that $150,000, what that gets us. I mean, 25 there's study, and then there's got to be, you know, certain things that buys us, and whether the 25,000 goes first. And again, I think that that's one of those mileposts, as we say, okay, we're going to spend 25,000 to see if the market study works here. And then if it says, yes, it works here, then the EDA and the city council has a second decision, okay, go or no go. And then we'll know what else that the remainder of the 150,000, where it goes for, well, you know, what we get for that. And we don't have identified where that's going to come from yet now.
And then just one more question for you, Dave. At one point, one of the concepts was condos above the hotel. Is that out of play right now, or is that still in play? Or?
I think that's up to the one. I think you want to hear from the community on that one.
There's no developer that you're aware of that has any interest in that project to be that part of that partner.
Well, two aspects of it. If we get back the feasibility study, like I said, a community like this, I went and looked at similar communities, generally have over 500 rooms. With the new hotel at the racetrack, the community will have 216 hotels rooms. So it may be that we need that. What that tower shows you is a 150-room hotel. We may need 150 keys. Then then to do condos, it's a different structure, and I think the council is going to want to go. You know, there's a lot of considerations, right? You can't just fill up a lot. I mean, I'd love to go. I mean, and I guess there are ways to do it. I think the Gone companies came up with great solutions for what they're doing. So maybe we go and we have another tower or L-it to be able to put condos in there. So the answer to that is we'll find, I mean, condos on top of a nice hotel we can get a partner to come in and develop with us on that. I'm not concerned about that.
I have one more quick question.
Absolutely.
For Gateway or for the Hools, have you guys done any studies yet that you've paid for?
There's been, well, listen, I mean, you're looking at several thousands of dollars for each one of these renderings. There's been a lot of work that we would normally not have done. Frankly, I funded those out of personal funds to get it to this point. We usually don't have renderings. We don't usually have the package that you saw there. So we don't have any studies that say this is feasible. because it's a far reach.
Right. I'm just wondering, maybe, because it seems like if you're going further, more and above and beyond than you normally would, there's some pretty credible information that this would probably go forward on a feasibility study. So I'm wondering, what information do you guys have that we're really pushing at this point?
I think you look at in the general sense, a community like this is what we look for. We generally would want to see more hotel rooms and other hotels. That gives me pause, I have to be honest with you. It gives me pause to say, why don't we have more hotel rooms in Forest Lake? I can't tell you. And that's what we would find out in that study, is there might be a reason for it. But looking at communities like this is what we look for to do this kind of project. If you want me to get in the weeds, I can. I don't know how much time. We don't have time.
Not this evening. Any last questions?
Just a comment, I would love to see a copy of a comparable feasibility study from a.
Sure, that would be in the sample pre-development report.
I would echo those comments. I think actually it's something would be helpful for all of us to see as we're considering next steps. And then also, just anytime we're talking about the occupancy tax, I want us to be clear that historically, we've had this conversation in Forest Lake. Historically, that conversation was a broader use that was overall visitor convention bureau, not just for a single site. And so I just want to be clear that what is being proposed would be for a single site, which is a change in policy from what we've discussed before. Not to say we can't go down that route, but recognition that it is a change in policy to what has been entertained. This board has spent a fair amount of time on it, as well as council in the past. So just wanted to make that point. With that, thank you for taking the time. We appreciate it. And more to come for sure.
And feel free, you have all my contact information. I do answer my phone. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next item on the agenda is an open forum. I did want to make sure we provided some opportunity for public comment. And is there anybody that has signed up?
I didn't know that was supposed to be signed up for this EDA meeting, right?
This is the EDA meeting, and I'm happy to add you onto the list as soon. Perfect, thank you. And if we could limit, because we do have a number of comments and we have a council meeting at 7, if we could limit to 3 minutes. Eric Langness. Welcome.
Mayor, Council, EDA. So, Eric Langness, 9610 223rd Street North. I also sit on our Planning Commission. And when I read actually, let me step back. I want to avoid saying most things about this project so that I keep an open mind, both in the sense of those things that I like and those things that I have concerns about. But there was one thing that, because I sit on our Planning Commission, I'm just compelled to bring it up when I read it in the packet. And among the many different asks, there's one, it's the first one listed under entitlements that the developer proposed. And the first line says, the site of the proposed convention center hotel is assumed to be appropriately zoned and no additional planning and zoning approval is required. And that gave me great concern. As a member of our Planning Commission for multiple terms for many years, a commission where I believe all of our members work towards a yes when things come forward, I can't think of a single project of magnitude that our Planning Commission has said no to, ultimately, in all of the time that I've served on it. And I think in all of those instances, including those that I've voted no on, because we don't always have a unanimous decision at the end of the day, we have a better project for our community, we have a better project for our city, and we have a better project for those developers. I would highly encourage that we scratch that entitlement during this process. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Schaefer.
I just got a few comments. Up in Lindstrom, they're building a convention center or something. And somebody told me they're using school funds. I don't know this, but I think you should go find out. The school here should have plenty of money. They keep having a fundraiser every other year, so they should be rolling in dough. The other thing is that convention center will do me absolutely no good. I'll probably never be in it. I don't know, everything that, since we've been annexed, everything has happened in the city itself, the old city. They took all of our money in the first place, and they still want more, I guess. So what kind of a convention would come to this city that would bring wealth to the city? Does anybody have an idea who's coming here? Give me an instance. I got a hunch that, you're going to be digging for people to come and use it. Next thing you know, you'll be discounting it. Pretty soon you'll be losing money on it. So please think this over. I mean, I'm sorry to put Mr. Hool in the poorhouse, which is not going to happen. But anyway, let's really think this over before we jump in it with both feet. Thank you.
Mr. Norby?
I'm in bad shape. This is not a nasty thing, but I wish this city, I've been here going on 29 years now, and both Ron and I were fading into the sunset fast. My pacemaker's giving out. Anyway, a goal of common sense goes a long, long way. They keep bragging up this city of 20,000. We are not a city of 20,000. We're a 4 square mile downtown city. Of half that, there's nothing in the township. We got no street lights, we got no water, we got no sewer, we got no businesses out there, not a thing. I've got nothing against the city. I've been, like I say, I've been here 29 years now. And the big thing gives me, what did Park Place do for downtown? What did the Gone building do for downtown? What's the Y done for downtown or for us? What's this building done? We're so damn far in the hole, I'm having a hard time making my damn payments on all my stuff. And like I said, it's a matter of slowing down. You just need some common sense for a while. I live in St. Paul, okay? I left there in 51, went to California, went to college. St. Paul is dead. I live in University Avenue. The Coliseum's gone. The Saints ballpark is gone. All of University is gone. Everything. My wife and I met in the Center Theater. We worked there together in the 40s. Okay? So to me, St. Paul is dead. What do they got? They got a downtown ballpark at Lower Town, and they got that new soccer arena. Everything's gone. Sears is dead now. So to me, I wish the city would think about the taxpayers and what it's costing them and what are the benefits from it. That's my big thing. Because there's nothing downtown. Downtown Forest Lake is dead. All that's down there is Vanelli's Beer Joint. In fact, I've got a magazine I'm bringing in the next meeting. It's dated when I first moved back here. It says, I think it's Forest Lake in Wyoming, dated 1990-91. Quan Yee's was down there. All these places are gone. I mean, we've got no hospital. There's no grocery stores downtown. Let's slow down the train here, and let's set a course that's going to move on. I worked in the aerospace, okay? I worked on the Apollo, the space shuttle, I had B-1B bombs. We had them looking ahead. And now all those industries are gone too. They've all been sucked up, they've merged. But to me, the city of Forest Lake needs somebody that's going to do something for the whole city. And I wish that they would recognize the fact there's still 32 square miles of rural area out there where we live. That's all. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Absolutely. Please. Name and address for the record, please. Thank you.
My name is Chris Hoyt. I live at 7327 North Shore Trail here in Forest Lake. I'm also one of the realtors that represent the Hools. And I just wanted to address something with Mr. Husnick. It wasn't Gatehouse Capital that let that out. We've been sitting with this plan for about a year. We approached a previous council. It didn't go so well. We kind of sat on it for a while, but as representing the Hools as a realtor, we decided that we better start marketing the property in case this idea never came to be, because we didn't want to leave the Hools just standing with nothing, when if this didn't go through. So what happened was we put a Facebook post out, a little pre-marketing Facebook post about the Hools were officially selling it. On the sly, they've been selling for the last 5 years, but they've been holding out because they didn't want to sell to apartment buildings or condos. We put it on Facebook, and I wouldn't say it went viral, but for Forest Lake standards, it went viral. And so just so you know, it wasn't Gatehouse Capital that did that. We started that, and once that started, stuff started to slip out a little bit. So apologize for that, but thank you.
Thank you. With With that, we'll close open forum and bring conversation back to Council and EDA. I believe our next agenda item is Washington County updates from Chris Eng. Chris, anything for us tonight?
Thank you, Mayor Bain and members. I don't have any updates or formal reports for you, but I would be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions for Mr. Eng?
I would just mention one thing. There's a series of site plans we have brought forward to Dan to somehow put together in a package, all on the premise that a while back we started looking at taking advantage of what the county's offering in terms of a team approach to doing studies. And that we have an opportunity to bring many more studies forward, or at least example sites forward to be considered for study. And I'd like to see that process begun so that we're actually looking at a menu of items to look at instead of just bouncing off one at the other at times. So I'm hopeful that in a future agenda, we can bring forward some of those site considerations so that we can say this fits or this doesn't fit within your spectrum, and see if we can't work together on taking advantage of the generosity the county offers.
Anything else? Anybody else have anything for the other category this evening? All right, with that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
And a second? All those in favor? Aye. We're adjourned.